They say that family is supposed to be your safety net, the one place where you can fall and know for a fact that someone will catch you. But what do you do when that net is actually made of barbed wire? What happens when the people who invited you into their circle, who promised you a fresh start and a seat at the table, are the same ones sharpening the knives behind your back? I used to think I knew what toxic looked like. I thought I had escaped it when I packed my entire life into a few boxes and moved across the country, leaving behind everything and everyone I knew just to find a sense of peace. But sitting here today, looking at the decorations for my son's 3rd birthday, I realized that I didn't escape the storm. I just walked right into the eye of a different one. I'm 29 years old, and for the last 10 years, my husband has been my rock. He's 32, steady and kind. Everything I didn't have growing up. When we had our son 3 years ago, everything changed. Suddenly the world felt smaller, more precious, and a lot more dangerous. We wanted him to have the childhood I never had. We wanted him to be surrounded by cousins, grandparents, and the kind of unconditional love that I only ever read about in books. So when my husband's aunt, I'll call her A, suggested we move closer to them, it felt like an answer to a prayer. She told us how much she wanted to be a part of our son's life. She talked about family values and being there for each other. We listened, we packed, we moved. But the thing about family values is that they often come with a hidden price tag. Living with my mother-in-law, who I'll call MIL, has been a journey in itself. She's 53, and honestly, I love her like the mother I no longer have. I've been no contact with my own parents for a long time. It was a survival choice. One of those heart-wrenching decisions you make when you realize that staying near your biological family is slowly killing your soul. So Mel became my world. She's gentle, but she's fragile. She spent her life under the thumb of a very overbearing mother, and because of that, she doesn't really know how to stand up for herself. She avoids conflict like it's a physical illness. Then there's Aunt A. A is the pillar of the family, or at least that's how she sees herself. She's 53 as well, stubborn, blunt, and possesses this specific kind of intensity that can fill a room and suck all the oxygen out of it. At first I admired her. I thought she was just a strong woman who didn't take any nonsense. But as the months turned into years, I started to see the cracks in that facade. A likes control. She likes to be the one everyone turns to, the one who knows best, the one who holds the keys to everyone's happiness. And me, I'm the daughter-in-law who speaks up. I'm the one who doesn't just nod and smile when something feels wrong. In this family that makes me a target, the tension started small. It always does, doesn't it? It starts with the way she looks at my kitchen. If there's a stray dish in the sink or a toy on the floor, she doesn't just see a busy mom, she sees a failure. She makes these little comments, these tiny sharp needles disguised as helpful advice. Oh, I would never let my house get this cluttered. Or are you sure the baby should be eating that? It's a constant low-level buzz of judgment that makes me feel like a stranger in my own home. I tried to brush it off. I told myself it was just her way, that she was older and from a different generation. I prioritized the peace because my son absolutely adores her. To a 3-year-old, Aunt A is the fun lady who takes him on adventures. She takes him to the park, to the store, to see the world. But every time he goes out with her, my stomach ties itself in a knot. A gets distracted. She's the kind of person who starts a conversation and forgets that the toddler in her care is currently climbing something he shouldn't. My son has come home from these little outings with a busted lip, a massive bump on his forehead, and scraped knees more times than I can count. Every time she has an excuse. He's just a boy, she says. Kids get hurt. And while I know that's true, there's a look in her eyes, a lack of concern that makes my maternal instincts scream. But I stayed quiet. I didn't want to be the difficult one. I didn't want to take away my son's joy. Everything reached a breaking point about 3 weeks ago. My MIL was going through something incredibly personal and stressful. It was a situation that had her shaken to her core, and because she's been a victim of emotional abuse in her past, she was paralyzed. She didn't know what to do or how to move forward. One night, the 4 of us, me, my son Emil, and Aunt A, went out for ice cream. We sat there under the bright fluorescent lights of the shop, the smell of sugar and cold air surrounding us, trying to have a normal family night. We talked about the situation. We weighed the options. It felt like we were a team. The next morning, MIL came to me privately. Her eyes were red and her voice was shaking. She looked at me and asked if I could help her. She didn't go to A. She came to me. She asked me to help her figure out a plan to help her navigate the legal and emotional mess she was in. I didn't hesitate. I'm a fixer by nature, and like I said, I love this woman. I spent the morning researching, making calls, and sitting with her to map out her next steps. I thought I was being a good daughter-in-law. I thought I was doing what family does. I had no idea that by helping MIL, I had effectively declared war on Aunt A. The explosion didn't happen in person. It happened where all modern family dramas go to die, the group chat. I was sitting on the sofa, finally taking a breath after a long day, when my phone started vibrating incessantly. Notification after notification. I picked it up, expecting a funny meme or a question about dinner, Instead, I found a wall of text from A that made the blood drain from my face. She was livid. In her mind, I hadn't helped MIL. I had overstepped. She accused me of being a predator, of swooping in and taking advantage of MIL's vulnerability just to exert my own influence. The words she used weren't just angry, they were calculated to hurt. She told the entire group, my husband and MIL included, that I was intense and calculating. She said that I was the kind of person who gets an idea in my head and becomes like a rabid dog with a bone. I remember staring at that phrase, a rabid dog. She didn't stop there. She told me that I was manipulative, that I knew exactly how to twist words to get what I wanted, and that people like me scared her. She finished her tirade by saying that this situation, me helping a woman who specifically asked for my help, was the last straw. She told the group she loved everyone else in the family, but she didn't love me. That it was my own fault I was an outsider. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I looked around my living room, the room she had criticized, the home I had tried so hard to build after leaving my own toxic past behind, and I felt utterly, completely alone. I had moved across the country for this. I had left my best friends and my support system to be called a rabid dog by a woman who was supposed to be my family. The worst part wasn't even the insults. It was the realization that she knew. She knew about my past. She knew about the mommy issues I struggle with, the way I constantly seek validation because I never got it as a child. She took all that vulnerability and used it as a weapon. She knew exactly where to strike to make sure I bled. I put the phone down and I broke. I cried until my chest ached. I felt like that little girl again, the one who was never good enough, the one who was always too much or too intense for the people who were supposed to love her. My husband was incredible. He saw the messages and immediately stepped up. He told her she was out of line. He told her he didn't want her coming over to our house for a while. He chose me. And for a moment, that was enough. But then 2 days later, the apology came. It was a text in the same group chat. She said she was sorry. She said she had been stressed and that she shouldn't have said those things. To anyone else, it might have looked as sincere. But to me, it felt like a tactical retreat. She realized she had lost her access to the house and, more importantly, her access to my son. I told her I appreciated the apology, but that I needed space. I needed time to heal from the venom she had spat at me. Since then, she's been trying to love bomb her way back in. She's liking every single one of my Facebook posts. She's sending casual texts asking about my job. She's acting like the rabid dog comment never happened, and now the deadline is approaching. My son's 3rd birthday is just days away. She sent a message asking what time she should come over. She wants to be there for the cake, the presents, the family photos. And for the first time in my life, I find myself standing at a crossroads. Do I swallow my hurt for the sake of my son's happiness? Or do I finally draw a line in the sand and say, no more? The silence in our house that week was heavy, the kind of quiet that feels like it's pressing against your eardrums. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart would skip a beat, a cold shot of adrenaline hitting my system before I even saw the screen. It's a physical reaction I've had since I was a teenager, a reflex born from years of dealing with my own parents where a notification wasn't just a message, it was a landmine. I thought I'd left that version of myself behind on the other side of the country. I thought I'd grown enough, healed enough to not let words break me anymore. But rabid dog is a hard phrase to shake. It echoed in my head while I was folding laundry, while I was making my son's lunch, while I was trying to fall asleep. Rabid dog, impulsive, manipulative, calculative. She had used those specific words because she knew my history. She knew I had fought tooth and nail to be a better person than the people who raised me. To call me manipulative wasn't just an insult, it was a targeted strike at the very core of my identity. It was her saying, you think you've changed, but I see you. You're just like them. And the worst part, a part of me believed her. That's the mommy issues I mentioned. When you grow up in a house where love is conditional and your character is constantly under fire, you develop this desperate, aching need to be seen as good. You become a people pleaser. You seek the praise of the very people who treat you like a punching bag because in your broken logic, if you can just get them to love you, then you must finally be worthy of it. I found myself looking at her Facebook likes on my photos and feeling a pathetic momentary spark of relief. See, she doesn't hate me today. I'm safe today. And then a second later, the anger would rush in hot and suffocating. How could I be so weak? How could I want the approval of a woman who had just tried to alienate me from my own family? I looked at my son playing on the floor with his toy trucks. He's 3. He's all light and noise and unfiltered joy. He doesn't know about group chats or last straws or the complex web of trauma that his mother and grandmother carry around. To him, Aunt A is just the lady who gives him extra cookies and takes him to the park. But then I looked at the small fading scar on his chin from the last time she took him out. That day he had come home with a shirt stained with blood and a lip so swollen he could barely speak. A had laughed it off. He's a whirlwind, she had said, waving a hand dismissively. He tripped on the curb while I was looking at some flowers. You know how he is. I did know how he was. He was 3. He needed an adult whose eyes were on him, not on flowers. I remembered the way my stomach had dropped when I saw him, the way I had to fight the urge to scream at her. But I didn't. I had taken him from her arms, cleaned his face, and offered her a tight, strained smile. I had prioritized her feelings over my son's safety because I didn't want to cause a scene. I didn't want to be intense. But sitting there staring at the birthday guest list, I realized that my silence was becoming a permission slip for her behavior. My husband saw me staring at the wall and sat down next to me. He's been my shield through all of this, but I could see the exhaustion in his eyes too. This is his family. This is the woman who helped raise him. He loves his aunt, or at least he loves the version of her he grew up with. But he loves me more. You don't have to have her here, he said softly, putting a hand on my knee. If it's going to make you miserable on his birthday, we can just tell her it's a small thing this year. Just us and my mom. But she already asked, I whispered. And she apologized. If I say no, I'm the one being difficult. I'm the one keeping him away from his family. That's exactly what she'll tell everyone. Let her tell them, he countered. Who cares what she says in a group chat? I care, I admitted, my voice breaking. I care because I don't want to be the reason this family falls apart. I moved here for this, remember, for him to have this. I looked over at my mother-in-law, who was sitting in the armchair by the window knitting. She hadn't said a word during our conversation, but I could see her needles clicking faster and faster. She's a gentle soul, truly, but she's been conditioned by her own mother to stay quiet, to absorb the blows, to be the peacekeeper at any cost. She had been the one A was protecting when she attacked me, yet Mile had been the one to tell the truth that she had asked for my help. Mom, I asked. She looked up, her eyes wide and full of a kind of deep-seated apology that broke my heart. I just don't want any more fighting, she said, her voice barely a whisper. She can be a lot, but she loves the boy. She really does. Does she love him enough to pay attention so he doesn't get hurt? I asked more sharply than I intended. Does she love him enough to respect his mother? MIL looked back down at her knitting. She's always been this way. If you ignore it, it eventually blows over. But that's the thing about blowing over. It doesn't actually go away. It just settles like dust on every surface of your life until you can't breathe. I realized then that if I followed MIL's lead, I would spend the next 20 years being the rabid dog whenever I dared to have an opinion. I would be the one crying in the bathroom while the rest of the family sat at the table and pretended everything was fine. I thought about the birthday party. I could see it now. A walking into my house, her eyes scanning the room for something to criticize. She'd make a comment about the cake I spent hours baking. She'd try to take over the gift opening. She'd treat me like a stranger, or worse, like a servant in my own home. And I would have to sit there and take it all while my son looked on, learning that this is what family looks like. Is that what I wanted for him to grow up, thinking that love means letting people walk all over you? To think that honoring your elders means sacrificing your own mental health and safety. The conflict was eating me alive. On one hand, I wanted to be the bigger person. I wanted to prove her wrong, to show her I wasn't impulsive or manipulative. I wanted to show her that I could move past her cruelty for the sake of the family. On the other hand, every time I thought about her walking through my front door, I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to sit down. She had apologized, yes, but an apology without change is just manipulation. It's a way to hit the reset button so you can start the cycle all over again. And I knew deep in my gut that the cycle wasn't over. She hadn't changed her mind about me. She just wanted back into the house. A few days ago, she actually took my son and MIL out shopping. She didn't come inside when she dropped them off. She stayed in the car, respecting the boundary my husband had set. My son came back beaming, clutching a new toy, talking a mile a minute about Auntie A. He was happy, and seeing that happiness made my guilt tenfold. Am I the villain here? Am I the one punishing a 3-year-old because I can't handle a few mean texts? But then I saw it, a small purple bruise on his forearm. What happened here, baby? I asked, my voice tight. I fell in the store, he said, already distracted by his new truck. Auntie was looking at the shirts. There it was again. The distraction, the small, insignificant injury that happened because she wasn't looking. It was a bruise today, it was a busted lip last month. What would it be next time? A broken bone? Something worse? I looked at my phone. There was a new notification, a tag on Facebook. She had posted a photo of the two of them from that afternoon. The caption read, "Nothing matters more than family. So glad I get to spend time with my favorite boy despite the hurdles in the way. Can't wait for the big birthday party." Hurdles. She was talking about me. Even in her sweet post, I was the obstacle. I was the problem she had to overcome to get to my son. I felt the familiar sting of tears, but this time they weren't tears of hurt. They were tears of clarity. I realized that as long as I allowed her to treat me like a hurdle, she would never respect me as a mother. And if she didn't respect me as a mother, she would never respect the boundaries I set for my son's safety. I turned to my husband. "We need to talk about the birthday," I said, my voice finally steady. "Really talk about it." The word hurdle. It's such a small, innocuous word on its own, isn't it? Just 6 letters. But in the context of that Facebook post, it felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. I wasn't a person to her. I wasn't the woman who had welcomed her into my home, the mother of her great-nephew, or the wife of her nephew. I was an obstacle. I was something to be jumped over, pushed aside, or cleared out of the way so she could get to what she actually wanted. I sat on the edge of our bed that night, the blue light from my phone screen illuminating the dark room. My husband, Mark, was already under the covers, but I could tell by the way he was breathing that he wasn't asleep. He was waiting. He knew that look on my face, the look of someone who had finally reached the end of their rope and was staring down at the fraying threads. She called me a hurdle, Mark. I said, my voice barely a whisper. I didn't even have to show him the post. He knew exactly who I was talking about. Mark sighed a long, tired sound that seemed to carry the weight of the last 10 years. He sat up and leaned against the headboard, rubbing his eyes. I saw it. I know. It's her way of playing the victim. She wants people to think she's the one fighting to keep the family together while you're the one tearing it apart. And is it working? I asked, turning to look at him. Because I feel like I'm losing my mind. I feel like every time I try to protect myself, I'm the one who ends up looking like the villain. Your mom thinks I should just ignore it. You want peace. A wants back in the house. And meanwhile, I'm the one crying in the bathroom because I was called a rabid dog in front of my entire family. Mark reached out and took my hand. His palms were warm and calloused, a grounding force in the middle of my internal storm. You aren't the villain. You're the one who's been hurt. And I'm not asking for peace at your expense. If you don't want her at the party, she doesn't come. Period. I'll be the one to tell her. That's the thing about being married to a good man. He'll take the bullets for you. But I knew what would happen if he did. A would blame me. She'd say I manipulated him into choosing me over his family. She'd use it as proof that I was exactly what she said I was, calculative. I don't want you to have to choose, I said, but I also don't know if I can sit at that table and watch her blow out his candles and pretend like she didn't call me a rabid dog 3 weeks ago. I don't know if I can trust her to watch him for 5 minutes without him coming back with another bruise because she was looking at shirts or distracted by flowers. When does it stop, Mark? When does the family part actually start including me? We talked for hours that night. We talked about the move across the country, about the dreams we had of a big, happy family, and about the reality we had landed in. We talked about his mother, how her own history with her mother had left her so terrified of conflict that she'd rather watch her daughter-in-law be insulted than risk an argument. It was a cycle, a generational toxic cycle of silence and keeping the peace that had been passed down like a grim family heirloom. And suddenly it hit me. If I let A come to the party, if I swallowed my pride and my pain and my genuine concern for my son's safety just to avoid a scene, I wasn't being the bigger person. I was just joining the cycle. I was teaching my son that his mother's feelings didn't matter. I was teaching him that it was okay for people to treat you like garbage as long as they said sorry and brought a present. I was becoming my mother-in-law. I looked at the framed photo on our nightstand. It was a picture of me and my son from last summer. He was laughing, his face covered in watermelon juice, and I was looking at him with a look of such pure, uncomplicated love. I had promised him the day he was born that I would be the shield I never had. I promised him a home where love wasn't a weapon and where his safety, emotional and physical, was the priority. How could I keep that promise if I let a woman who called me a rabid dog and people like you scare me sit at our table? I don't think she should come. I said the words, finally feeling solid in the air. Not for the big party. Maybe she can come the day after for a quick visit, but not for the actual celebration. I want his third birthday to be about him and about us and about feeling safe. I don't want to spend the whole day looking over my shoulder or wondering if she's judging the way I cut the cake. Mark nodded slowly. Okay, I'll call her tomorrow. No, I said, surprising myself. I'll do it. I'll message her. If I let you do it, she'll just say I'm hiding behind you. I need to be the one to set the boundary. I need to show her that I'm not a hurdle. I'm the mother of this house. The next morning, I woke up with a hollow feeling in my stomach. It was that fight or flight response again. My hands were shaking as I pulled up the group chat. I didn't want to do this. Every fiber of my being wanted to just delete the app, throw my phone in the lake, and go back to being the girl who says it's fine when it's clearly not. But I thought about that purple bruise on my son's arm. I thought about the word calculative. I started typing. I didn't use insults. I didn't use the same venom she had used. I was calm. I was clear. I told her that while I appreciated her apology, the things she had said were incredibly hurtful and had damaged my trust in our relationship. I told her that I still needed space to process everything, and that because of that, I wasn't comfortable with a big family gathering for the birthday. I suggested she could come by a few days later to drop off a gift and see him for a bit, but that the actual birthday would just be the 4 of us. I hit send, then I put the phone face down on the counter and walked away. 10 minutes later, the notification started. It wasn't a reply from A. It was a private message from my mother-in-law. Honey, please, it read. A is so upset she's crying. She said she just wanted to see the baby. Can't we just put this behind us for one day? For the sake of the family? It's going to be so awkward if she's the only one not there. Please don't do this. My heart sank. This was the part I hated. The flying monkeys. In toxic family dynamics, the flying monkeys are the people who are sent by the aggressor to guilt trip you into submission. My Amiel didn't mean to be a flying monkey. She was just scared. She was scared of A's temper, scared of the awkwardness, and scared of the family unit cracking. I went into the living room where Amiel was sitting. She wouldn't look at me. Her eyes were red. Mom, I said, sitting down across from her, I love you. You know I do. You're the closest thing I have to a mother, but I need you to understand something. When A says those things to me, when she calls me names and tells the whole family she doesn't love me, it hurts. It doesn't just blow over for me, it stays. She was just angry, MIL whispered. She says things she doesn't mean when she's angry. But why is it okay for her to be angry and hurt me? But it's not okay for me to be hurt and set a boundary? I asked. Why is my comfort always the thing that has to be sacrificed to keep her happy? I'm not keeping him away from her. I told her she could see him. I'm just saying she can't come to the party in my home. My home should be my safe place, Mom. And right now she makes me feel like I'm under a microscope. MIL finally looked at me and I saw the conflict in her eyes. She wanted to agree with me. I knew she did. She had been on the receiving end of A's honesty many times before, but the fear was stronger. The decades of conditioning were stronger. It's just going to make things worse, she said. She's going to tell everyone you're being cruel. Then let her, I said, though it felt like a lie. It hurt to think people would see me that way. I can't control what she says. I can only control what I allow in my life, and I can't allow that kind of energy at my son's birthday. That afternoon, A finally responded to the group chat. She didn't address me directly. She addressed the group. It's clear that some people aren't interested in forgiveness, she wrote. I've done my best to apologize and make amends, but I suppose if you aren't perfect enough, you aren't welcome. I'm heartbroken that I won't be there to see my nephew blow out his candles, but I'll respect the boundary. I hope everyone else has a wonderful time. It was a masterpiece of passive aggression. She had managed to cast herself as the humble, repentant aunt and me as the cold, unforgiving gatekeeper. I felt the familiar urge to reply, to defend myself, to list every single mean thing she had ever said to me as a justification for why she wasn't invited. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard, itching to fight back. But then I remembered a rabid dog doesn't stop biting because you explain why it's wrong. It stops biting when you put a fence between you and the dog. I didn't reply, I just locked my phone. But the fence I had just built was about to be tested in a way I never expected. Because while I was busy worrying about the birthday, something else was happening. Something that would prove that my concerns about A's distractions weren't just anxiety. They were a warning I should have listened to much sooner. The days leading up to the birthday were supposed to be filled with the smell of vanilla frosting and the sound of crinkling wrapping paper. Instead, the air in our house felt like it was charged with static electricity. Every time I walked into the kitchen and saw my mother-in-law, she'd look away. There was no more talk of for the sake of the family. There was just a cold, biting silence that made me feel like a ghost in my own hallways. A had successfully turned the narrative. In the eyes of the extended family, she was the grieving aunt who had been banned from her nephew's milestone by a difficult and sensitive mother. I started getting private messages from cousins I hadn't talked to in months. Is everything okay? A sounds devastated, one wrote. Another said, life is too short for grudges, honey. Think of the baby. It's a special kind of hell when the world tells you to forgive someone who hasn't even stopped hurting you. They see the I'm sorry text, but they don't see the rabid dog comment that preceded it. They don't see the way she looked at my son's bruises with total indifference. They just see the hurdle. I was sitting on the floor of the playroom trying to assemble a toddler-sized workbench when Emiel walked in. She was dressed to go out, her purse clutched tightly in both hands. I'm going to the park with A, she said, her voice small. She wants to give him his birthday present today, since she won't be there on Saturday. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked at my son, who had overheard the word present and was already running toward the door shouting for his shoes. My instinct, the one I'd been trying to drown out for weeks, screamed no. Mom, I don't know, I said, standing up. Things are still so tense. Maybe we should just do the gift drop-off here on Sunday like we planned. MIL's face crumpled. She's already in the car, honey. She's waiting at the end of the driveway. She said she doesn't want to come inside and cause trouble. Please, just an hour at the park. I'll be right there with her. I won't take my eyes off him. I looked at my son's face. He was beaming. He loved his grandma, and he loved the adventures with his aunt. If I said no now, I would be the one taking that smile away. I would be the one denying him a fun afternoon. I looked at ML, the woman who had been my only mother figure for years, and saw how desperate she was to just have one normal hour. 1 hour, I said, my voice heavy with a dread I couldn't explain. And please, Mom, stay close to him. Don't let her get distracted. I promise, she said. I watched them walk out the door. I watched him climb into the back of Mill's car, waving at me through the glass. A was in the passenger seat. She didn't look at the house. She didn't wave back. She just sat there, a silhouette of defiance. I went back to the workbench, but I couldn't focus. I tried to scroll through my phone, but every like from A on my old photos felt like a mockery. 45 minutes passed, then 50. At the 60-minute mark, I was standing by the front window watching the street. At 75 minutes, my phone rang. It was MIL. The moment I saw her name on the screen, I knew. You know that feeling when the floor seems to drop out from under you? When the air in the room suddenly feels too thin to breathe? That's what hit me before I even swiped to answer. Hello, I said, my voice tight. There was noise in the background, traffic, wind, and then the sound of Emil sobbing, not just crying sobbing. I'm so sorry, she gasped. I'm so sorry. We're at the emergency clinic. You need to come. The world turned into a blur. I don't even remember grabbing my keys or telling Mark we had to go. I just remember the drive. It felt like it took hours, even though the clinic was only 10 minutes away. My mind was a kaleidoscope of every bruise, every distraction, and every time I had stayed quiet to keep the peace, I had known. I had felt it in my gut, and I had let him go anyway. When we burst through the clinic doors, I saw them. MIL was sitting on a plastic chair, her head in her hands, her clothes covered in dirt and what looked like grass stains. A was standing over her, her arms crossed, looking more annoyed than upset. And there was my son. He was sitting on a high exam table, a nurse dabbing at his forehead. There was a gash just above his eyebrow, deep and jagged, and his shirt was soaked in blood. He wasn't crying anymore. He was just staring at the wall, looking tiny and pale and terrified. What happened? Mark's voice was a low growl, the kind of sound I'd never heard from him before. Mill looked up, her face a mask of guilt. We were at the park, near the pond. I saw a friend from her old job. They started talking. I was watching him, I swear I was, but then A called me over to show me something on her phone. Just for a second, I thought she had her hand on his stroller, but he wasn't in the stroller, he was running toward the rocks. I looked at A. She didn't even have the grace to look ashamed. He tripped, A said, her voice defensive. It was an accident. Kids trip. If the park district maintained the rocks better, this wouldn't have happened. I walked past her. I didn't say a word. I went straight to my son and took his hand. It was cold. He needs 6 stitches, the nurse said softly. He's going to be okay, but he's had quite a shock. 6 stitches. For a 3-year-old. I stayed with him while they did the procedure. I held his hand while he screamed a sound that will haunt my dreams for the rest of my life. I watched the needle go in and out of his skin, and with every stitch a part of the old me. The people-pleasing, keep the peace girl died. When we finally walked out of the treatment room, A was still in the waiting area. She actually had the audacity to walk up to us with a shopping bag. Anyway, she said as if we were discussing the weather, since he's okay now, I wanted to give him his gift. It's that truck he wanted. I figure this will make him feel better. I looked at the bag. Then I looked at her. Get out, I said. My voice wasn't loud. It wasn't intense. It was cold. It was the sound of a bridge burning. A blinked, her mouth falling open. Excuse me, I just spent $40 on this. Get out of this clinic, I repeated, stepping closer to her. And don't you ever come near my son again. Do you understand me? You aren't a hurdle anymore. A, you're a ghost. You're nothing. You're being hysterical, she spat, turning to Mark. Mark, tell your wife she's overreacting. It was a scratch. He's fine. Mark didn't even look at her. He was holding our son, his face set in stone. She told you to leave, A. If you don't walk out those doors in the next 10 seconds, I'm calling the police to report child endangerment. You were supposed to be watching him. You weren't. A's face turned a deep, ugly purple. She looked at Meal, expecting support, but for the first time in 50 years, Meal didn't look back. She just sat there, staring at the floor, finally broken by the weight of her own silence. I snatched her bag off the chair. Fine, she hissed, looking at me with a hatred so pure it made my skin crawl. Keep him. Raise him to be as miserable and scared as you are. You'll see. One day you'll have no one left. She turned on her heel and marched out, the automatic doors sliding shut behind her with a soft whoosh. The silence that followed was heavy, but for the first time in weeks, I could breathe. The peace was gone. The family unit was shattered, and as I looked at the bandage on my son's head, I realized I didn't care. I had been so afraid of being the villain in her story that I had almost let her become the tragedy in mine. We took our son home. We canceled the big party. On Saturday, it was just the 3 of us and my MIL, who spent the day sitting in the corner quietly, helping my son play with his new toys. She didn't mention A. She didn't ask us to move on. I think she finally realized that the price of peace was too high for any mother to pay. But A wasn't done. The next morning, I woke up to a notification. It wasn't a text. It was a post on the local community Facebook page. A had posted a photo of my son's gift sitting in the trash can. The caption read, "Some people would rather see their child suffer than let a calculative aunt show them love. Truly heartbreaking what happens when someone's past trauma makes them see enemies where there are only family members. Pray for my nephew." She had gone public. She had taken our private pain and turned it into a weapon to destroy my reputation in the town we had just moved to. I sat there at the kitchen table, the sun streaming in, looking at her post. My heart didn't race, my hands didn't shake, I just felt a deep, quiet resolve. She wanted a rabid dog fine. She was about to find out what happens when you push a mother too far. The blue light of my phone seemed to burn into my retinas as I stared at that post. It wasn't just a post, it was a manifesto. She had tagged local businesses, community leaders, and even the moms group I had recently joined to try and make friends in this new town. She knew exactly what she was doing. She was poisoning the well before I even had a chance to drink from it. She was making sure that every time I walked into a grocery store or took my son to the library, people wouldn't see a young mom trying her best. They would see the unstable woman who kept a loving aunt away from a child. "Pray for my nephew," she had written. The hypocrisy of it was enough to make me want to scream. She was asking for prayers for the child she had allowed to get injured. She was weaponizing my trauma, the very things I had told her in confidence when I thought she was a safe harbor, to paint me as a broken, paranoid person who saw enemies in the shadows. I looked at the comments. They were already rolling in. So sad when mothers let their own issues hurt the kids, one woman wrote. Family is everything. I don't know how people can be so cold, said another. A is the sweetest person. I've known her for years. This is shocking, added a third. The peace I had felt at the clinic evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp-edged clarity. I realized that my silence wasn't a shield anymore. It was a cage. By not speaking up, I was letting her write the script of my life. I was letting her define who I was to people who didn't even know my last name. Mark walked into the kitchen, his face drawn and pale. He had seen it too. He sat down across from me, his coffee untouched. She's gone too far, he said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. This isn't just family drama anymore. This is character assassination. She used my past, Mark, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. She took the things I told her about my parents, the abuse, the neglect, the reason I moved across the country, and she's using it to tell this town that I'm mentally unfit. She's telling everyone that I'm scared because I'm broken, not because she's dangerous. I'm calling a lawyer, Mark said, reaching for his phone. No, I said, stopping him. A lawyer will take months. This is happening now. People are judging us now. My son is going to grow up in this town, and I won't have him known as the kid with the crazy mother while she plays the martyr. I felt a shift in myself then. For years, I had been the girl who ran away. I ran away from my parents. I ran away from conflict. I moved thousands of miles just to find a place where I wouldn't have to defend my existence. But you can't outrun a shadow. Eventually, you have to turn around and shine a light on it. I stood up and went to the playroom. My son was sitting on the rug, his large white bandage a stark contrast against his blonde hair. He was playing with the trucks Mark had bought him to replace the gift A had thrown in the trash. He looked up at me and smiled that pure, unconditional smile that makes every sacrifice worth it. "Mama, look, big truck," he chirped. I knelt beside him and kissed the top of his head, avoiding the stitches. "It's a great truck, baby. Mama's proud of you." I went back to the kitchen and grabbed my laptop. If A wanted to play this out in the court of public opinion, fine. But I wasn't going to be a rabid dog. I was going to be a mother. I started typing. I didn't write an angry tirade. I didn't call her names. I didn't use the words manipulative or calculative, even though they fit her perfectly. Instead, I wrote the truth. I wrote about the move. I wrote about the hopes we had for a family. And then I uploaded the photos. I uploaded the photo of my son's busted lip from 3 months ago. I uploaded the photo of the bruise on his arm from last week. And finally, I uploaded a photo of the 6 stitches currently holding his forehead together. I wrote, "I have spent the last 3 weeks being told that I am too intense and too sensitive for wanting to keep my son safe. I have stayed quiet while my character was attacked because I wanted to protect the peace of my family. But peace cannot exist where there is no safety. My son was in the care of his aunt yesterday when he suffered an injury that required 6 stitches because she was distracted. This followed a pattern of neglect that I chose to overlook for too long in the name of family. I am not keeping my son away out of spite. I am keeping him safe out of duty. I will not apologize for being a mother who prioritizes her child's physical well-being over an adult's ego." I didn't tag her. I didn't need to. I posted it on my own page and shared it to the same community group, then I shut the laptop. The fallout was instantaneous. My phone didn't just buzz, it screamed. A's sister called. Her cousins called. My mother-in-law, who was in the other room, came into the kitchen with her phone in her hand, her eyes wide with terror. "You posted the pictures," she whispered. "Everyone is seeing them." "Good," I said. "They should see them. They should see what family love looks like when it's covered in blood and stitches." "A is hysterical," MIL said, beginning to pace. "She's saying she's going to sue you for defamation. She's saying you're trying to ruin her life." "She ruined her own life the moment she stopped watching a 3-year-old near a rock pit," I replied. "I'm just documenting the results." But the victory felt hollow, because even though the comments on the group page were suddenly turning in my favor, even though people were now asking why an aunt would be so distracted that a child needed stitches, the atmosphere in our home was toxic. My Amiel was caught in the middle of a war she never wanted to fight. She spent the afternoon crying in her room, the sound of her muffled sobs drifting through the vents. Mark was pacing the house like a caged animal, checking the locks, looking out the windows. We were living in a fortress of our own making, and the enemy was someone who lived just 5 minutes away. Around 4 p.m., a car pulled into our driveway. It wasn't A. It was her husband, a man who usually stayed out of everything, a quiet, stoic guy, who mostly just nodded at family dinners. He got out of the car and walked to the front door. Mark went to meet him, and I followed, standing just a few feet behind. "I'm not here to fight," he said, his voice weary. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. A is in a bad way, Mark. She's losing her mind over that post. She wants you to take it down." "She should have thought of that before she posted about my wife's trauma to the whole town." Mark set his hand tight on the doorframe. "I know. I told her she shouldn't have done it," the husband said. "But look, she loves that kid. She's a bit much, yeah. She's blunt, but she's family. Are we really going to let a scratch and some Facebook posts destroy 10 years of history? A scratch." I stepped forward, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "It was 6 stitches, Jim. It was a gash so deep I could see the bone. And while my son was screaming in that clinic, your wife was more concerned about her $40 gift than the fact that she had failed him. She didn't even say she was sorry to me. Not once." Jim looked at his shoes. "She doesn't know how to apologize like that. She's proud." Then she can be proud in an empty house, I said, because she isn't coming back here. Not for the birthday, not for Christmas, not ever. Until she can look me in the eye and acknowledge that my son's safety is more important than her pride, she is dead to us. He sighed a heavy, defeated sound. It's going to be a long winter, Mark. Yeah, Mark said. It is. He watched Jim drive away, then he closed the door and locked it. He turned to me and pulled me into a hug. I leaned into him finally, letting a few tears escape. I felt like I had been holding my breath for 10 years and I was only just starting to exhale. But that night, the long winter, Jim predicted, started early. I was putting my son to bed, reading him his favorite book about a little red tractor when I heard a loud thud against the side of the house. It sounded like someone had thrown a heavy rock against the siding. My son jumped his eyes wide. What's that, Mama? Just the wind, baby. I lied, my heart racing. Then came the sound of tires screeching at the end of the driveway. I tucked him in, kissed his forehead, and ran to the living room. Mark was already at the window. What happened? I asked. Someone just threw a bag of trash onto our porch, he said, his voice flat. I looked through the glass. There, sitting right in front of our door, was the gift bag A had tried to give my son at the clinic. It was ripped, the toy truck inside smashed into pieces, and scattered all over it were printouts of my Facebook post marked up with red pen. Words were scrawled across the paper in jagged, angry letters: liar, manipulator, rabid dog. She hadn't just come to our house. She had come to mark her territory. She was showing us that she wasn't going to go quietly. She was showing us that if she couldn't be the beloved aunt, she would be the nightmare we couldn't wake up from. I looked at the smashed truck and the red ink, and I realized that this wasn't just a family feud anymore. This was a war of attrition, and as much as I wanted to believe that the truth would set us free, I was starting to realize that with people like A, the truth is just more fuel for the fire. There is a specific kind of silence that follows an act of domestic terrorism. I know that sounds like a strong word, terrorism, but when you are inside a home that is supposed to be your sanctuary and someone from your own bloodline is outside in the dark, defacing your property and calling you a rabid dog in red ink, there is no other word for it. It is the calculated use of fear to bend someone to your will. Mark didn't say a word as he grabbed a pair of work gloves and a heavy-duty trash bag. I watched him from the window, his silhouette illuminated by the porch light as he bent down to pick up the remains of the smashed toy truck. He moved with a mechanical, stiff precision. He wasn't just cleaning up trash, he was picking up the shattered pieces of his childhood's perception of his family. Every piece of plastic he dropped into that bag was another memory of Auntie A being tossed away. When he came back inside, he looked older. The lines around his eyes seemed deeper, and the jaw that usually held a quick smile was set in a grim, permanent line. He didn't look at me at first. He just stood by the door, the trash bag heavy in his hand. "I'm calling the police," he said. It was the sentence I had been waiting for, and yet hearing it made my stomach do a slow, nauseating roll. "Mark, if you do that, there's no coming back. For your mom, for the rest of them, it's a permanent mark." "She came to our house at night, babe," he said, finally looking at me. His eyes were red-rimmed. "She threw things at the walls where our son was sleeping. She's stalking us. If this were a stranger, we wouldn't even be debating it. The only reason we're hesitant is because we're giving her a family discount on her insanity, and I'm done with the discount." He was right, but as he picked up the phone, a door opened down the hallway. My mother-in-law stood there in her nightgown looking like a ghost. She had heard everything. She had seen the red ink through the window. She was trembling so hard, I could hear her wedding ring clicking against the doorframe. "Please," she whispered. "Mark, please don't call the police on your aunt. She's sick. She's not herself. If you do this, the whole family will never speak to us again. My sister's my mother. They'll blame me. They'll say I let this happen." I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't feel pity. I felt a cold, hard frustration. This was the cycle. This was the peace she had been begging for. It was a peace built on the backs of victims. It was a peace that required me to accept being harassed, and my son to accept being injured also, and Mel didn't have to have an uncomfortable phone call with her sisters. "Mom," Mark said, his voice surprisingly gentle but firm. "She did this, not us. You're worried about who they'll blame? Look at what she wrote on those papers. She's already blamed us for everything. She's already told the whole town that your daughter-in-law is a rabid dog. Where was your concern for the family then?" Mill just put her face in her hands and started to sob. It was a gut-wrenching sound, the sound of a woman who had spent 50 years trying to be the good girl, and finally realizing that being good hadn't protected her from anything. Mark made the call. The police arrived about 20 minutes later. They were professional, but you could tell they'd seen this kind of family dispute 1,000 times. They took photos of the red-inked papers. They took the bag of trash as evidence. They asked if we had a doorbell camera. We didn't. We'd only moved in a few months ago and hadn't gotten around to it yet. "Without a clear video of her face, we can't charge her with much tonight," the officer said, snapping his notebook shut. "But we can go to her house and knock and talk. We can serve her with a formal warning. If she comes back after that, it's trespassing and harassment." "Do it," Mark said. As the patrol car pulled out of our driveway, I felt a strange mix of relief and terror. I knew I knew that a knock and talk from the police wouldn't scare her. It would offend her. It would ignite her. In her mind, she was the matriarch. She was the one who held the moral high ground. To have the police show up at her door because of the outsider she hated, that was the ultimate insult. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the sofa watching the sun slowly crawl over the horizon. I thought about my own parents. I thought about the day I left them. I remembered the feeling of driving away, looking in the rearview mirror and seeing my mother standing on the porch, screaming that I'd be back because I was too weak to survive without her. I had spent years trying to prove her wrong. I had worked 2 jobs, put myself through school, and built a life that was stable and quiet. And yet here I was 2,000 miles away, facing a different woman with the same eyes. I realized then that I had been seeking A's approval because I was still trying to win the argument with my own mother. I wanted A to love me so I could prove that I was lovable. I wanted her to see me as a good mother so I could heal the wound of being a bad daughter. I had been using a toxic woman to try and cure my own toxicity. It was a fool's errand. The morning of the birthday finally arrived. It wasn't the day I had imagined. There were no balloons on the mailbox. Mark was afraid they'd be a target. There was no big group of kids running in the backyard. It was just the 4 of us, me, Mark, our son, and a very quiet, very withdrawn Miel. I had spent the morning baking a chocolate cake. It was lopsided, and the frosting was a bit too runny, but when I brought it out to the table, my son's face lit up like 1,000 suns. Cake mama made cake. He didn't care about the 6 stitches hidden under his hair. He didn't care about the police or the Facebook posts or the red ink. He just cared that we were all there singing to him. For those 10 minutes, the world was small and safe. But as we were cutting the cake, my phone buzzed. Then Mark's phone. Then MIL's. The knock and talk had happened. And as I suspected, A had gone nuclear. She hadn't just posted on Facebook this time. She had gone to the family group chat, the one that included every aunt, uncle, and cousin in a 3-state radius. She had sent a photo of the police officer at her door. "This is what happens when you try to love a child in this family," she wrote. "You get the police sent to your door like a criminal. Mark has been completely brainwashed by that woman. She's using the law to tear us apart. I am heartbroken. I am shaking. I can't believe my own nephew would do this to me after everything I've done for him. She is a poison." The responses were a flood of blue bubbles. "Mark, how could you? This is shameful. Calling the cops on your own blood? She's an elder, Mark. Show some respect." I watched Mark's face go from pale to a deep vibrating red. He started typing a response, but I put my hand on his arm. "Don't," I said. "Let them talk. Let them say whatever they want. We know the truth." "They're calling you a poisoned babe," he snapped, his voice shaking. "They're siding with the woman who let our son get his head cracked open." "I know," I said, "but look at him." I pointed to our son who was happily smearing chocolate frosting all over his cheeks, oblivious to the digital war being waged over his head. "This is what she wants," I continued. "She wants us in the mud with her. She wants the drama. She wants the intensity. If we respond, we're giving her exactly what she needs to keep the fire going. Let it burn out. We have the police report. We have the photos. If they want to believe a woman who throws trash at houses at night, let them. They aren't the people we moved here for." Mill looked up from her phone, her eyes brimming with tears. "They're saying I have to choose. My sister just texted me. She said if I stay in this house, I'm dead to them too." The room went silent. This was the moment of truth for MIL. She had lived her whole life in the shadow of these people. She had let them dictate her happiness for 53 years. "Mom," Mark said, his voice soft, "we love you. We want you here, but we won't live like this. We won't let A in this house, and we won't let her influence how we raise our son. If you need to go to them to keep your peace, we'll help you pack. But you need to know that if you go, you're choosing her version of the truth over ours." I held my breath. I expected her to cry. I expected her to make excuses. I expected her to leave. But instead, MIL did something I'd never seen her do. She took her phone, held it over the center of the table, and she deleted the group chat. Then she blocked A's number. "I'm tired," she said, her voice finally steady. "I'm so tired of being afraid of her. She let my grandson get hurt. That's the only truth that matters." It felt like a victory, but it was a heavy one. We spent the rest of the day in a bubble trying to ignore the world outside. But as night fell, the fear returned. Every time a car drove by, I found myself tensing up. Every time the house creaked, I wondered if it was her. I realized that we couldn't stay here. Not like this. We had moved across the country for family, but we had found a cage. "Mark," I said as we were cleaning up the kitchen that night, "I don't think we can live in this town." He stopped drying a plate and looked at me. I was thinking the same thing. "We have some savings," I said, "and your job is remote. My job, I can find something else. I don't want to live 5 minutes away from someone who hates me this much. I don't want our son to grow up in a place where the air feels like this." "Where would we go?" he asked. I looked at the map in my head. I thought about the friends I'd left behind, the support system I'd traded for a dream that turned into a nightmare. "Somewhere where family isn't a weapon," I said. But as we began to talk about the logistics of moving again, a realization hit me. A wasn't going to let us just walk away. She had spent weeks calling me a manipulator and a calculative person. If we tried to leave, she would see it as the ultimate act of taking away her family. And she was about to do something so desperate, so incredibly out of bounds, that it would make the red ink on the porch look like child's play. The next 48 hours were the longest of my life. When you're being hunted by a family member, and that's exactly what it felt like, a hunt, there is no such thing as a safe neighborhood. Every time a car slowed down in front of the house, I held my breath. Every time the wind knocked a branch against the roof, I was up and checking the baby monitor. Mark and I spent the weekend in a feverish blur of logistics. We were done. The dream of the big happy extended family was dead, and we were currently standing over the grave. We started looking at rentals back near my old support system, the friends I had left behind, the people who actually knew my heart. We didn't care about the cost, we didn't care about the hassle, we just wanted to be somewhere where the name A didn't carry the weight of a threat. But A wasn't going to let us just fade into the sunset. She had been building a case against me for weeks, and she was ready to present her closing argument. It happened on Monday morning. Mark was in the home office on a conference call, and I was in the kitchen trying to get my son to eat some oatmeal. Miel was sitting at the table staring blankly at a cup of tea. The house was quiet. Then came the knock. It wasn't the aggressive, erratic pounding of a woman in a rage. It was a steady, professional, rhythmic knock. My heart did a slow, heavy thud in my chest. I looked at Miel. She looked paralyzed. I went to the door and looked through the peephole. Standing on my porch was a woman in a sensible navy blazer, holding a clipboard. Behind her, parked at the curb, was a white government sedan. My blood turned to ice. I knew that car. A man youth car? I knew that look. I opened the door, my hands trembling so much I had to hide them behind my back. Can I help you? I asked, my voice coming out thin and reedy. Good morning, my name is Sarah Jenkins. I'm with Child Protective Services, the woman said, her voice devoid of emotion. We received a report regarding the safety and well-being of a minor in this household. I'm here to conduct a welfare check and an initial interview. I felt the world tilt. CPS, the last straw she had mentioned in the group chat, this was it. She hadn't just tried to ruin my reputation, she was trying to take my son. A report, I whispered. On what grounds? The report alleges a history of emotional instability in the mother, as well as a recent incident where the child suffered a significant head injury that was potentially the result of neglect or a lack of supervision. The worker said, looking down at her notes. The room started to spin. She had flipped it. She had taken the injury she caused and reported me for it. She had taken my history of trauma, the things I had survived, and used them as proof that I was an unfit parent. Please come in, I said, stepping back. I felt like I was moving through deep water. Mark came out of the office, his face turning ashen when he saw the worker's ID. Miel stood up from the table, her tea splashing over the rim of the cup. For a moment, we all just stood there, the weight of the accusation hanging over us like a guillotine. I need to see the child first, Sarah Jenkins said. I led her to the kitchen. My son was sitting in his high chair, his face covered in oatmeal, a wide, happy grin on his face. He looked at the stranger and waved a sticky hand. Hi, he chirped. The worker walked over to him, her eyes immediately landing on the large white bandage on his forehead. She didn't say anything, but she made a note on her clipboard. My heart felt like it was being squeezed by a giant hand. Can you tell me how this happened? She asked, looking at me. He was with his aunt, I said, my voice cracking. We weren't there. She was supposed to be watching him at the park. She got distracted, and he fell on the rocks. We took him to the emergency clinic immediately. He got 6 stitches. And who is the aunt? The worker asked. Her name is A, Mark said, stepping forward. She's the one who made this report, isn't she? The worker didn't answer. She couldn't legally. But the silence was an answer in itself. For the next 2 hours, our lives were dissected. She looked in our pantry. She checked my son's bedroom. She interviewed Mark. She interviewed Miel. And then she sat down with me. The reporter expressed concern that you have a history of manic behavior and that you've been alienating the child from his family as a form of emotional abuse. Sarah said, her eyes searching mine. She mentioned that you moved across the country to escape your own parents and that you've brought that paranoia into this home. I looked at her, and for the first time since this nightmare started, the fear vanished. It was replaced by a cold, crystalline anger. I moved across the country to give my son a life, free from people like that. I said, my voice low and steady. And I am alienating him from his aunt because she allowed him to be injured and then harassed us at our home. I have police reports, Sarah. I have photos of the trash she threw on our porch. I have text messages where she calls me a rabid dog for helping my mother-in-law. Would you like to see them? I didn't wait for her to answer. I went to the office and grabbed the folder I had started. I laid it all out on the kitchen table. The clinic discharge papers with the timestamp and the description of the injury. The printouts of the group chat where A admitted she was looking at flowers when he fell. The photos of the red-inked liar and rabid dog papers on our porch. The police warning that had been served to her 48 hours prior. The worker spent a long time looking through the folder. The room was deathly quiet, save for the sound of the pages turning. Miel sat in the corner, her head bowed, finally finding her voice. It's true, Miel said, her voice shaking, but clear. A is my sister. I love her, but she did this. She's obsessed with control. My daughter-in-law is a wonderful mother. She's the only one in this family who actually had the courage to put the baby first. The worker closed the folder. She looked at my son, who is now playing on the floor with his trucks, then back at me. I see a lot of cases, she said softly. Usually the people who are unstable don't keep meticulously organized files of evidence, and they certainly don't have the support of the family members they are supposedly alienating people from. She stood up and handed me her card. I'll have to do a follow-up, and I'll be speaking with the aunt to get her side of the story. But based on what I've seen today, I don't think you have anything to worry about from our department. In fact, if I were you, I would look into a permanent restraining order. This level of escalation is concerning. When the door closed behind her, I collapsed into Mark's arms. I sobbed until I thought my lungs would burst. The sheer cruelty of what she had tried to do to use the system designed to protect children to tear a family apart was a level of evil I wasn't prepared for. That was the turning point. We didn't wait for the long winter. We didn't wait for another knock and talk. 2 weeks later, there was a for sale sign in our yard. We didn't tell the extended family where we were going. We didn't post it on Facebook. We didn't even tell the cousins. The day we left, A tried one last time. She drove by the house while the movers were loading the truck. She sat in her car at the end of the driveway just watching. She didn't get out. She didn't scream. She just stared at me through the windshield with a look of such profound, hollow bitterness that I actually felt a flicker of pity for her. She had won her war, but her prize was an empty house and a family that would never speak her name again. We moved back to the coast. We're in a small house now, far away from family, but surrounded by people who love us without conditions. My son is thriving, his scar is fading into a thin, silvery line, a reminder of a lesson I had to learn the hard way. I realized that family isn't about blood or history or keeping the peace. Family is about who shows up when you're bleeding. Family is about who respects your boundaries even when they don't understand them. My mother-in-law moved with us. She has her own little suite in the back, and for the first time in 53 years, she's learning how to live without checking the group chat first. She's happy. We're safe. Sometimes I still look at my phone and expect to see a message calling me a rabid dog. But then I look at my son laughing in the backyard, and I realize that the only person who was ever scared was A. She was scared of a woman who knew her worth. She was scared of a mother who wouldn't be bullied. I'm curious, have any of you ever had a family member use your past against you just to get their way? How did you handle the guilt of setting a boundary that the rest of the family didn't agree with? Let me know in the comments. Your stories help remind me that I'm not alone in this. And if you want to hear more stories about standing up to toxic family dynamics, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. It really helps the channel out. I chose my son over my family, and I'd do it again 1,000 times. Because at the end of the day, a mother's first job isn't to be liked, it's to be a shield. And my shield is finally holding strong.